My conversation with Dennis Deninger is going to be like he and I playing tennis. I'm going to throw him a drop shot. He's going to hit it right back. I'm going to send him a lob. He's going to run it down. We're going to cover the court of his career. And man, has he done a lot. Obviously, he teaches classes at Syracuse. Wish I was one of his students, but 25 years at ESPN. He's a veteran there, Emmy Award winner. He's got a book out, and it's actually the second edition of the book. It's on Amazon. Go get it. Come on. It is called Live Sports Media, the what, how, and why of sports broadcasting. I feel like that's what we're going to do, Dennis, here. We're going to learn about the what, the how, and the why of who you are. This is the Onto Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. I've also done some volleyball with ESPN and tennis with USTA. So very excited about all that you've done in the tennis space. And I guess I wanted to start here as we start this conversation. How did your one-hand backhand become such a weapon?
I'm not sure I even asked that question of any tennis players. That was the only sport that I played in high school. And I didn't go to ESPN seeking to take over tennis production. I had worked in local news all the way up through Miami, and I had worked in New Haven, Connecticut, and Connecticut is where ESPN was founded. So I had some contacts there, among them George Grand, who was the first anchor of SportsCenter. And 3 years into the life of ESPN, I was made aware of an opening for coordinating producer of SportsCenter. So I actually started at ESPN with no tennis responsibilities, but my expertise in working in a local newsroom in Miami applied to, all right, this is a sports newsroom in Bristol, Connecticut. And very few people even knew what ESPN stood for at the time. But a succession of different jobs at ESPN. One of the great things that I tell my students is if you can get your foot in the door of a big company, you can grow within the company. Then I had 5 different jobs while I was at ESPN. And about 10 years into my tenure, I was presented with the challenge of, Dennis, we want to put a new face on our tennis shows, and we're expanding tennis coverage. So that's how I got involved in tennis. Long way to get around there, but that's kind of the way the broadcast careers go, one step to another and make a few right and left turns.
A little bit of hopscotching, but no better person to traverse that, to navigate that than Dennis Deninger. He joins me. I'm Bryan Fenley. So you were talking about, Dennis, when ESPN was just getting started, everyone was learning and trying to figure out what ESPN stood for. That was certainly, it was new. So that was going to be decided as it gained experience in more years out in the public eye. What do you stand for, Dennis?
I stand for always giving more than 100%. I think it's really smart for young people to realize that if you are given an assignment, doing that assignment is a good thing. Bringing something more to that assignment is even better. So coming up with an idea, volunteering to do something extra, kind of made my mark in the tennis field when I introduced our line calling technology, which we called ShotSpot, to American television and to the Grand Slams. I had seen an infrared technology being used at the women's championships in Munich. A little company in Germany was doing this. And I thought to myself, how could we incorporate that into the coverage I was responsible for in the United States? And I worked with that company. And then I worked with Hawkeye, which was in London. And we put this technology on the air, and suddenly nobody could say you can't be serious because line calls were line calls. And that was something that wasn't in the shows when they were handed to me, this property, and you look to do something more. So what I stand for is always doing something more, always being curious. Bill Rasmussen, who was the founder of ESPN, has this really great line. He said to me a couple of years ago, he says, Dennis, without ABC and NBC, there never would have been an ESPN. Then he elaborates, he says, ABC is always be curious. Here's a guy, he was 42 years old when he was fired from the New England Whalers, but he was curious about how to get into more sports broadcasting and maybe doing some live Whalers games and UConn basketball and football games. So he started asking questions, and NBC stands for never be complacent. Never, ever, you can't be happy with the routine. You cannot sit still. The way I refer to it is, if you don't make that extra search, if you don't make that extra phone call and instead choose to sit back and have another cup of coffee, that's complacency. And somebody else is going to move past you. So even at my advanced age, you got to be curious and you can't be complacent. You've got to keep improving.
You said that so poignantly, and you brought up obviously one of your great inventions and something you work so much on in ShotSpot, in that you're able to review lines, instant replay in tennis, and bring that up on television. If we were to just throw this, Dennis, into like an alternative reality here, where we were to bring up ShotSpot and show what you're like around your grandkids, and to really get a sense of who you are when they are around you, what are we going to learn about you?
You know what? I've got 4 little granddaughters, which is wonderful. You know, it gets noisy when they come to visit. And then when the match is over, it's quiet again, you know, and they're always in motion, which is, in any sport, you crave the motion. You know, you crave the action, and you've got to be involved in the action. So if you were to see me with my granddaughters, I would be very engaged in what they're doing. It's very often that my wife and my son and daughter-in-law they'll be the adults and I'll be off playing with the kids, because playing is what we thrive on as a society. And sport is one of those wonderful factors, tools that brings people together, from all walks of life, different genders, different nationalities. You enjoy the action. So I enjoy being in the action.
You know what I love about you, Dennis, is everything personal comes back to sports. You know, and that is what it means to you, this world, television and sports. When do you find in your life you have conversations that are completely non-sports related? Because I find that it's almost impossible for you not to have those anywhere.
I'm curious about a lot of things. So part of that always be curious is not just be curious with blinders on, but be curious about lots and lots of things. I've been a subscriber to newspapers and a variety of different news services for a long time. And I'm interested in lots of stuff, but my area of expertise is in sports. So that's where I share my opinions most, with the neighbors and with acquaintances and with friends. You know, you have lots of different conversations, but somehow or other, a sports analogy winds up getting into the conversation. And I confess.
One of the things, Dennis, that I was listening to you in another podcast, and you'd be the first to admit this, it's sometimes hard for you to stop talking because of the passion, because of the curiosity when it comes to sports. And you've got great stories and great input and insights. So with that said, when do you find yourself the most quiet?
You know what? When I'm alone. That's when I'm the most quiet, is when I'm alone. When there are people around, I love engaging with people. And that's part of the thrill of teaching. You know, I left ESPN after 25 plus years, when I had the opportunity to go back to my alma mater and teach. And being in a room with 30 or 40 young people and exchanging ideas and stimulating their minds. One of the things that I point out to them is that they'll watch a sports telecast or any telecast, and they'll only see a small number of people on television. You'll see Mike Tirico, you'll see an analyst, you'll see a sideline reporter. That's about it. But there are usually well over 100 people. I mean, this past Super Bowl, NBC had 700 people at the Super Bowl in Los Angeles. And those are all jobs. Those are all careers. So what I get my people interested in is, hey, because I'm chatting you up, because I'm telling you all these things, it might give you an opening to, this is a career that I'd like to pursue that I never even knew was a career before. So I confess to being a bit, verbose at times, but I think it does come with the passion. If you're passionate about whatever your profession is, whatever your product is, then you're going to, I think, add to that conversation.
How far back, Dennis, do you trace that passion before you even got into a work setting, before you were at ESPN, before that year 1982 came, when you got to ESPN, when you're a child and we're looking at you back then and we're saying, that Dennis, he's passionate. Whatever he attacks, man, he is going to do something really great with that.
You know what? I like to trace it back to I grew up in a place called Hornell, New York, which is out in Western New York, Steuben County, out past Elmira and Corning. And it was small enough that it had a couple little radio stations that were founded when it was a big deal when the railroad was a big deal. They had shops that they repaired locomotives there and what have you. Well, as the railroads became less of a big deal, Hornell became less of a big deal. But they held on to these little radio stations that were founded in the 1920s. And I was curious about that. I heard the radio, and there were a couple recent graduates from the high school who were working there in the summer. So I inquired about it, and I wound up getting a job as a senior in high school. I was the morning news guy on the radio station, and I would work from 5:30 to 8:30 in the morning. Then I'd walk to school. So my teachers had already heard me doing the radio news in the morning, and that gets you fired up, and you get a little bit of feedback. It's one of those things that distinguishes you. Okay, what are you pursuing? And I've found that no matter what you try, what you attempt, if you're going to succeed, you have got to commit yourself to it. You need to get into it. You need to care about it. You need to research it, and you need to look forward to doing it every day. And when I started looking forward to going to the radio station, and I had a key, because it was a daytime station, it wasn't on during the night, it would come on at 6 a.m. or something. So I had a key to this place. And wow, how great is this for a 17-year-old? So I think that's probably where the fire was lit.
So because you are here, you are giving me a key to ask you to reenact what one of those reports would sound like when you were getting ready in the morning. What would Dennis sound like delivering the news?
Well, his voice certainly wouldn't. It'd be an octave or two higher here as a 17-year-old. And you know what? It was, you had to call the local police station and find out if there had been any accidents overnight. And out in the woods out there, there was a snowmobile accident now or then, or deer collides with truck stories. So there, and the radio station that I worked for was owned by one of he was the local state legislator. He was in the state assembly in Albany. So his radio station was also a way for him to help out and to get noticed by the voters, right? So one of the things that he had us do was we did obituaries on the radio. Oh, wow. You would end your local newscast with, and calling hours for so-and-so will be from 7 to 9 this evening at the Dagan Funeral Home on Main Street in Syracuse, Main Street in Hornell. And so I wound up writing a lot of obituaries when I was on the radio. Haven't heard obituaries on the radio anywhere else.
Yeah, it's probably a good thing, but I'm sure that gave you some interesting experience into writing, which is obviously such an important part of who you are, which segues us into the second edition of your book that has recently come out. I encourage everybody to check that out, Barnes & Noble, and of course, Amazon. Live Sports Media, the what, how, and why of sports broadcasting. So I was reading, Dennis, that sometime around 2020, maybe earlier, the idea was put into your mind to maybe bring out a second edition, because sports have changed a lot since in the broadcasting sector, since you had put this out, was it 2012, somewhere then. What are you like when you are trying to think about writing a piece like this? And what I mean by that is, where are you and where do you do your best thinking for really putting your ideas on paper and formulating that into a book like this?
I've always been a proponent of putting things on paper. Always been. And in fact, when I would have my annual production meetings for the different sports that I oversaw, at ESPN, I would always write down things and share them with, okay, this is a statement of purpose. Why are we doing what we're doing? We know what we're doing, what we're assigned to do, but what are we doing it? Who is the end receiver? How do we make the viewer, the audience enjoy this, stay with us longer? What is it that we're doing? So that kind of thing I got as in my years at ESPN, I got into the, all right, it's always good to write something down, and then that you can take that one step farther. I wrote the first book. I had just started teaching at Syracuse at the Newhouse School, and I was teaching a course called Sports on Television that I came up with along with the chair of the television, radio, and film department there, with a lot of the different chapters were, well, this is programming, and this is history, and this is production, and this is sales, and this is the struggle of power within the media, the sports media. So each one of these was a lecture, a weekly lecture. So I wound up with 14 or 15 lectures, and those became chapters for a book. And I was actually approached by the publisher originally. I guess what they do is they go through college catalogs and they look and see, oh, that's an interesting idea for a book. And if somebody's teaching it, they've probably done enough research on it to maybe start writing a book. So I was contacted by the publisher. He says, we'd like to have you put together an outline for this. And I realized that the notes that I had for these lectures gave me a 96-page outline. I mean, I'm feeling like I'm home free, but the process for moving forward to do the second book, I haven't worked at ESPN in over 10 years, right? I've been teaching and I've been observing and I've been involved and probably know more about the business broadly than I did when I was focused on different areas at ESPN. So what I did was I started doing interviews, and the new book has a lot of interviews with, for example, Burke Magnus, the president of programming for ESPN, and Ian Eagle, who's on the air with CBS and Turner, and Mike Tirico from NBC, and Fred Godelli and Drew Esikoff, who, producer and director for NBC Sunday Night Football and for Super Bowls. And I started doing interviews and then obviously transcribing them, writing down what they said, and then bringing in the new pieces and how the business had changed and how it isn't just sports on television anymore. It's live sports media that has been splintered across so many different distribution channels. So that, again, piqued my curiosity. And okay, how do we dig deeper in here, do some more research? And, I sat at my little desk and I basically knocked out 100,000-page term paper. So, but it took almost a year.
With all this Syracuse, Dennis, I gotta represent this hat here. So my girlfriend went to Syracuse. I did not, but she is a proud supporter and proud alum. And she probably knows many of your former students, having graduated. Well, depending upon, obviously you've taught there for some time, but she graduated, I think, right around 2014, 2013 time, but has so much pride. And I just feel that pride. And I feel like people, when they're around you, they feel a pride, they feel an energy. How do you feel that rubs off on others? Because there's such a positive, you can do it mindset that I feel, just propagates from you no matter what you're doing in life. And I feel like it's just fun to be around you. And when that's the case, how do you feel that can positively impact others in their pursuits, in their drives, and how you're able to see people that you're surrounding go off and do big things as well?
Well, yeah, first of all, thank you for those compliments. It's very kind of you. You know what? That's what the reward is. When you think about it, the reward for a producer on television is to have people consume and enjoy the product that you're presenting to them. And if they enjoy being around your product, consuming your product, and if they learn something from it, then they'll come back. And maybe you have elevated their understanding of this sport, this team, these players, this rivalry, this history, etc. What I love doing and what the reward that I get from teaching is seeing the success of young people that I've taught and they move on, and I help coach them and mentor them and let them know what things are possible. Actually, an example here is for the last couple of years, every summer I've been making a trip out to Cape Cod, and there are the 10 Cape Cod Baseball League teams that play out there with all college all-stars. And this year, there are 9 Syracuse University students who are doing broadcasting for those teams. They're doing play-by-play, they're doing color. I was there just last week, and the game I went to, it was Brewster at Chatham. The 2 on-air voices for Brewster were both Syracuse students of mine, and the 2 voices for Chatham were also students of mine. And there was a reporter from the Daily Orange up in the press box. So there were 5 Syracuse University students there. And what I do is, between innings, this would be a little bit better. You don't want to be redundant. This make the, and even it's funny that even the public address announcer came over to me during the game. He says, "Hey, I want to introduce myself." He's also a professor. He's a professor out in California. He goes to the Cape every summer. And he says, if you got any tips for me, let me know. So I actually gave him a tip. It was just, he needed to incorporate a pause before he said a player's name. He was kind of rushing through his introductions. And suddenly he felt better about what he was doing. So, those are the kinds of things that make my day, make my night, when I can help young people and they get something out of it, and they take themselves from this level to this level and this level. It's just more of a realization of what they're capable of doing. And I just kind of open the door or give them a concept of what can be achieved.
Along the lines of making your day, how does your wife make your day?
You know what? The fact that she's not at all involved in sports or broadcasting is wonderful. I've seen too many marriages of people in the business, and one gets a great job and then the other one doesn't get a job in the bigger market or on the network, and then you got all these tensions, et cetera. My wife is a very, very smart lady. She has 2 master's degrees. And for her career, she's been what I refer to as a library sleuth. She does research into old documents and old genealogies and pieces of art and pieces of music, et cetera, that are lying around in different libraries that have never been inputted to their catalog. And what she has done is she's constantly at the table with new stuff about, I was just cataloging these documents from the founding of the townships in South Africa, and they were in Afrikaans, and she took German when she was at Syracuse. We met at Syracuse. So she taught herself basically to understand Afrikaans. So there's lots and lots of interesting stuff. And we love traveling, and we both love Syracuse. We both graduated from Syracuse. So that's so whenever we start talking about Syracuse or doing some traveling, then we get fired up. So, she's been a great partner.
What fired you up the first time you met her? And what was that first encounter like when you saw her?
Scott, it's amazing that she even accepted an offer of a date from me, because we were in the Hall of Languages at Syracuse University, and there were these couple of big lecture halls. And I consciously sat about 2/3 of the way back, because I would go to class with this kid from Indiana next to me who was from the dorm. We're freshmen. And my whole goal during this British literature class was not to pay attention at all. My goal was to see if I could get this guy next to me to laugh. And I'm sitting behind this young lady who, she had real short hair at the time, and I noticed that she wore different earrings every day. So that was, okay, so not paying attention to her earrings, I'm not paying attention to the lecturer. And she said she came this close to turning around and just saying, "Could you be even more obnoxious?" So, but I was in another class of hers, and which was a much smaller class, I couldn't sit out of hearing range. So, and that one, it seemed like I was kind of personable and kind of intelligent. So, but yes, it could have been a disaster from the beginning, because I was an immature goofball when I first arrived at Syracuse University. So thank you, Syracuse, for helping me cure myself of that.
Well, I think that I'm sure there are ways, even today, away from work and around the family, where you can still be that little goofball. I don't know if that ever dies. I think that maybe you channel it in different ways. And I think that that's one of your enduring qualities, and one of the reasons why deep down, I think your wife is like, he's the one for me. It's interesting that you sort of created this scenario to get her attention. And I feel like over the course of your career, you've subtly gone about doing that by what you've done, in that you create attention. And how have you done that to just sort of get your name out there wholeheartedly? And obviously your work does the talking for you, but ways in which, let me put it like this, Dennis, you've put yourself out there, similar to what you were doing in that classroom, trying to get your future wife's attention, but ways in which you've successfully put yourself out there that at the time you were like, I don't know, but it ended up working out pretty well for you.
You know what? I think that anybody who is interested in succeeding needs to be willing to take on the challenge. You can't fear the unknown. You can't fear the future. So anything that's presented to you, if you look at it as an opportunity, what is it that I can do to improve this situation, this product, this performance of a person? What is it that you, so that's what you do and it's not really, I've never hired a publicist, for God's sakes, it's not like you're trying to seek publicity, but what you're doing is you're trying to make a difference. And if in the world we have people who try to make a difference with others, and I write a book that hopefully is very kind to, there's some folks who endorsed the book, and Rob Stone from Fox Sports said, "Where was this book when I was going to school?" And Fred Godelli said, this is a book that you really need to read if you're going to get into this business. So hopefully that's what you're doing is, okay, I am taking this on. I've decided to write 100,000 words, and what is it that will make a difference? And if that then generates some attention, then that's a byproduct. That's not a goal.
So then where does your pride come in? Everybody has varying levels of pride in sports media, ego, whatnot, but there's a healthy pride. So where would you categorize where yours stands, considering the book, considering your career, both from an academic standpoint and what you're doing at Syracuse and beyond, but also what you did at ESPN, and how you evaluate yourself in how you carry yourself, noting your accomplishments?
You know what? That's a very interesting question. You don't get asked about pride very often. I think that you're proud of what you've done that hasn't been done before. I was very proud of launching a series called Scholastic Sports America. I hired this 23-year-old kid from right out of the University of Colorado by the name of Chris Fowler. And Chris has done pretty darn well on ESPN and ABC over the years. But launching a brand new series that hadn't been done before, beginning a new course at Syracuse. I've launched a few courses. In fact, I teach what's probably the only course on an American campus about the impact that the Super Bowl has had on American society, on American business, on advertising and entertainment. So creating something new, or creating a new spark within someone, those are the things that give me pride, and that what I did make a difference. What I did helped, and what I did was it gave opportunity to either more people or opened the eyes of people to the opportunities that they may not have known existed. So that's what you're proud of. And I'll tell you what, every semester, universities around the country, they always do the students do surveys, answer surveys as to, okay, did your professor come to class prepared, and what was the best part about this, and all the professor care about you, and I'm very proud of those kind of reviews that I get, which are, they're anonymous from these students. And okay, I have helped them. I've made a difference for them. So I'm proud only again through the people that I've affected.
I like how you said that, Dennis, because as a student, there's the transactional relationship of, hey, you're in class, you got work to do. But what I love about you is that you take that caring to the next level. You care about the person and who they are underneath all of that. And that's sort of the basis of these kind of conversations that I love to have. And what we've been able to explore is that we've gotten to learn sort of what people know you as, but we've also got to see what you're like as a grandfather. We also got to see what you're like as a husband and the way ultimately you were able to woo your wife. I don't think those were questions that you thought you would be asked going into this conversation, but I wanted to leave you with this, Dennis, and that is, so you have produced TV sports on 6 different continents. So what's stopping you from Antarctica?
There's no wagering in Antarctica because there's nothing to bet on. See, they don't bet on penguin races. You know what I'm saying? Now, Antarctica is there's no sports competition in Antarctica that I know of. You occasionally see a documentary and et cetera, but on every other continent, there's competition. And sports is this part of what is the motor of society, social groups. You can go back in history and what is it that brings people together? It's sport. And so you got to do sport from populated areas here, my man. And so, we've done a lot from Europe. It was really challenging the first time I did live television from Moscow, did live tennis from Zimbabwe under very difficult circumstances because there were the technology that they had and economic crisis. It was hard to get a hold of gasoline to power our generator, and all of these challenges that you come to take on and you find ways around. I'm always a person who says you'll be judged by how you react when an obstacle comes in front of you. Do you stop or do you find a way around? Do you find a way over it? Do you find a way to make it dissolve? That's what you do. So, maybe if there is some kind of competition in Antarctica, I'll serve as a consultant on it. I'm not going to go down there. It's too cold.
It is too cold. But going to what you just said, if there's a way to do something, they go to you, and they've gone to you your whole career. And while you pointed out that there are documentaries that have been done on Antarctica, I think that when all is said and done, more documentaries should be coming out regarding you and showcasing you. Not just what you've done, but to what we got to in this conversation is how you treat people and how people look up to you and how much you care, deeply care. And I think that is one of the most endearing traits that I sense from you as an empath and as someone who would really enjoy this conversation. Dennis Deninger, I'm Bryan Fenley. Of course, Dennis teaching at Syracuse, worked at ESPN for 25 years, got a great book. It is out. Please go get it. 2nd edition on Amazon Live Sports Media, the what, how, and why of sports broadcasting. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio and USTA. Dennis, thanks so much for doing this, man. I really thoroughly enjoyed this.
Thank you so much, Bryan. This was terrific. I really enjoyed it as well. Cheers.